How is it possible to turn AD into a global player?
AD has to become two things to be a global player. It has to become cheap, and there has to be a lot of feedstock, and it has to be feedstock which is produced without consuming agricultural land that is used for food. To get it cheap, we have to look at nature, and in particular I think we have to look at cows and kangaroos, because they digest the same sort of material with the same sorts of bacteria, but up to 30 times faster than an ordinary anaerobic digestion plant. And what research at Oxford University is doing, which I have been leading, is to work out why a cow is so unreasonably good at doing anaerobic digestion. And then when we understand that, we need to start seeing what of that we can mimic in the industrial context. So that's the first thing. If we can get the cost down and the size down, we can build these plants in boxes, in containers effectively. So we design once, we build thousands. They become cheaper because they're smaller, they're cheaper because we build them in a factory, and they're cheaper to finance because now the bank has got something they can lend against. You can't lend against a concrete tank in a field because you can't take it away if the project fails. So that's the cost. You also need to have a better resource. Now, we can use agricultural waste. Agricultural waste, however, is not enough globally to make a big difference. We think it's a lot, but compared to the amount of energy from coal, from gas, from nuclear, it's small. So we have to find new plants which grow in new places where we don't have agriculture today. And those places are going to be the semi-arid areas of the world, places in Africa, in India, in Central America, which are warm and dry, often which have degraded soils, which don't have much agricultural production. And there is a class of plants that have developed, that have evolved to live in these places. And they are incredibly water efficient. They're called, the metabolism that they have is called the crassulacean acid metabolism, CAM for short. And CAM plants can be 10 times as water efficient as ordinary crops. So if we grow CAM plants in semi-arid areas, we can effectively turn these areas into huge energy farms. And we believe we can do that cost effectively. We can certainly compete with most of the other sources of fossil energy, way cheaper than oil and probably as cost competitive with coal. So that's the second thing that we need to do, and we need to bring those two things together. To do that needs a real research and development focus that we don't currently have. If we do that, then I think we have a chance of making a major impact globally with anaerobic digestion.
What about your project at Gorge Farm Energy Park?
So Africa is a huge continent. It has massive land area, enormous and fast-growing population, and huge, huge energy demands that are unmet. So you would expect that it would be very easy to develop renewable energy in Africa, particularly because we're doing anaerobic digestion and selling electricity to the grid at about 6 euro cents a kilowatt hour, which is cheaper than electricity is bought by consumers there. But the problem that Africa has is it doesn't have a strong experience in regulation, it doesn't have good governance, these are unfamiliar new technologies, and they don't fit with the grid as it currently is. So, for example, in Kenya, it took us 4 years to get a power purchase agreement to do a very simple 2 megawatt plant, even though we built the plant before we secured the power purchase agreement, and we more or less bent over backwards to make everything possible. It was just the first of a kind. It was difficult. Nobody was able to see, nobody really was in a position to take responsibility. Everyone was hoping that the problem would go away. I think that will change, but inconsistency in policy in other countries is really problematic. And more than anything, that stands in the way of the development of renewables in Africa.